In this lesson, we'll use Tailwind CSS to style our app component. Now, my intent here is to show you a couple classes available in Tailwind CSS. As I mentioned, there are literally thousands available, so I can't possibly teach every one of them. But I want you to be inspired by the idea of how Tailwind is supposed to work. We're just supposed to layer together these utility classes from Tailwind to form the entire UI. Now, we're not going to be replicating the existing styles that we have on the right-hand side simply because it would take a lot of work and we don't need that much practice to show you the basics of how Tailwind works. So in our app component, let's begin by clearing out some code. So I'll begin at the very top. We're no longer going to be utilizing styled components. We no longer need the actual logo, and we don't need any of these created styled components either. So I'm going to scroll down all the way until we get to our actual app component and delete the code up until that point. Now, of course, that will cause the app to break when it tries to compile because those components no longer exist, but we can replace them with their former HTML element equivalents. So before we had app container, we had a basic div here. So I'll add a div right here and right here. And this app header component was a HTML header component. So I'm going to bring this back to header and bring this back to header. This logo no longer exists, so we can remove it entirely. And finally, this link component right here was a plain anchor tag or hyperlink, so I'll replace it with an A tag. So when I save this, the app is back to normal. And as we can see, there are no actual styles applied. So we're kind of starting with a blank slate, and that's the perfect opportunity to show you how Tailwind works. So we have access to all of these thousands of Tailwind utility classes in our project now. So it's a simple matter of adding class name like we always have to the relevant HTML elements and then applying those pre-existing Tailwind classes. Remember, in React, we do not use class, we use class name. So right here, I will say class name. And here's a couple examples of some Tailwind classes. So for example, if I want to provide a background, there is a combination of classes that start with the prefix BG. BG is short for background. If I do BG dash, you're actually going to see all these classes appear thanks to the Tailwind CSS extension that we installed. So for example, these classes BG slate are various background colors of a slate color or a gray color, in other words. As I scroll down, we'll see there's gray, zinc, neutral, stone, there's red, and orange, and amber, and yellow, etc. So Tailwind gives us this kind of starter set of available classes just to style our background. So for example, one class that is available is BG blue. And then as soon as I type that, you can see that the Tailwind CSS extension limits the available classes that are in the search results so I can see what's available. So if we do BG blue -300, that is a valid CSS class from Tailwind. And when I save that, you see we're going to get that blue background. Another example, we have a class called text center. That, of course, is going to center the text. Inside the Tailwind CSS extension, you can also see in the box that pops up to the right of the Tailwind class name, you'll see the CSS property that is applied. So for example, the Tailwind CSS class is called text center, and what it applies to the element is the text align property set to center. So that's what we would write if we were within a CSS file. But as I mentioned, the Tailwind developers already made all those CSS declarations for us, and they gave us these helper classes to use, and we should be able to use all of these classes that they gave us to style the UI in whatever way we want. There's, of course, some room for flexibility, and I'll show you an example of that in the next lesson. But the entire key idea here is we have all the tools we need to style the interface. So I'm going to save that, and the text should center. So here's another example. I can go to this header element, once again, provide class name, and provide a whole bunch of Tailwind classes. So for example, HScreen is going to apply a height of 100 VH, which is vertical height or viewport height. That should make the box occupy the entire height of the screen. Then I can try to turn this header into a flex box. That's as simple as adding a flex Tailwind class, which applies the display property set to flex, right? Then I can orient this content or the flex children to be distributed in a column matter within my flex box by using flex col. As you can see, that sets the flex direction attribute to column. So these are all existing CSS attributes and properties. We just now have helper classes that are typically much shorter, easier to write, more concise, and as I mentioned, focus on just one element at a time. So we add one class for the flex box, then we add another flex to add the flex class to make the flex direction the column. Here's another example. We can do justify center here to apply the justify content attribute to be centered. And once I save this, you can see now we've oriented all of our content in the center of the screen. And there's also a bunch of classes related to things like font color and text size. So for example, the text classes right here all deal with text size. For example, I can do text to L here, which you can see is a font size of 1.5 rem or 24 pixels. So when I press enter and save that, you can see that increases the size of our content on the right-hand side. So that is basically the entire idea behind Tailwind. We're just applying these helper classes. They are immediately available once we set up all the logic we did a few lessons ago, and we can design whatever UI we want. There's even support for things like responsiveness. There's support for things like hover states, all kinds of different CSS pseudo classes, but they're all going to exist as predefined classes that are automatically available to us. We just add them together to build up the user interface. So this is a very simple example, but it should hopefully serve to demonstrate the point of how Tailwind works. We just use the classes that we've been given and create the interface that we are looking for. Don't worry, we're going to have a lot of practice with Tailwind as we proceed through the rest of the course. That's all there is to cover in this lesson, so I will see you in the next one.